Emily Dawson had always told herself she was strong. Strong enough to raise a child on her own. Strong enough to survive the cruel words of an ex-husband who had broken her down piece by piece. Strong enough to work 2 jobs and still come home to an empty apartment that echoed with her son's laughter when he wasn't there. But strength has limits, and hers had finally cracked. The custody battle had drained her. The lawyers, the court dates, the whispered judgments from neighbors in her small Texas town. They had left scars that no one could see. Worse, her finances had collapsed under the weight of it all. She felt trapped, cornered in her own life. When the cheap airline ticket to Cairo flashed across her screen one sleepless night, it felt less like a vacation and more like salvation. This is it, she whispered to herself, her finger hovering over the Book Now button. My second chance. The flight was long, filled with the restless stirrings of strangers and the low hum of engines. Emily stared at the darkness outside the window, wondering if she was brave or foolish. Every so often she checked a small photo tucked into her passport, the one of her son in his school uniform. His smile reminded her why she needed this, to come back stronger, steadier, someone to be proud of. When the plane descended into Cairo, the morning sun broke over the horizon, spilling gold across the Nile. From above, the city looked ancient and eternal, a mosaic of dust-colored buildings and winding streets that seemed to whisper secrets. But the moment Emily stepped into the arrivals hall, the air felt heavier. Cairo did not welcome her gently. It pressed down on her like a weight. The crowd surged around her, voices shouting in Arabic, taxi drivers calling out in broken English, children darting between legs with curious eyes. The smell of spices, sweat, and gasoline mingled in the heat, leaving her dizzy. She clutched her suitcase tighter. Just breathe, she told herself. You're free. This is freedom. Yet, freedom didn't feel like she imagined. It felt chaotic, overwhelming, almost suffocating. Outside, the city roared. Cars weaved like predators across narrow streets. Vendors shouted, holding up scarves and trinkets. The call to prayer rose above the noise, haunting and beautiful, but it made her feel more like an intruder than a traveler. She flagged down a taxi, her voice small. Hotel Ramses, please. The driver, a middle-aged man with sharp eyes, nodded but said nothing. The car lurched forward, swallowed by traffic. Emily pressed her forehead against the window. Minarets pierced the skyline, and murals of pharaohs stared at her from crumbling walls. The city pulsed with life, but beneath it all she felt a strange undertow, as if Cairo itself was watching her, waiting. The hotel was modest, tucked into a side street near downtown. The receptionist greeted her warmly. Yet Emily still felt out of place, a stranger in a world too ancient, too vast to understand. She collapsed on the bed, staring at the ceiling fan that clicked with every rotation. Maybe I made a mistake, she whispered into the empty room. Jet lag dragged her into a restless sleep, filled with dreams of sandstorms and faceless figures reaching for her. She woke hours later, sweat on her skin, her throat dry. Needing air, she stepped outside. The night in Cairo was alive. Lanterns glowed in narrow alleys. The smell of grilled meat wafted through the streets, and the rhythm of drums echoed somewhere in the distance. Drawn by curiosity, Emily wandered toward a bustling bazaar. Stalls spilled over with fabrics, jewelry, and strange trinkets. The energy was intoxicating, pulling her deeper into the maze of colors and voices. For the first time since she arrived, she almost felt excitement. Almost. Then, from across the market, a pair of dark eyes fixed on her. The crowd moved, but his gaze did not. A man leaned casually against a stall, smiling as if he had been waiting for her all along. Emily froze, her heart skipping. And in that charged moment, without knowing it, she stepped onto a path that would lead her far from freedom, and closer to a cage she could not yet imagine. The marketplace pulsed like a living creature. Lantern light spilled across cobblestones, weaving gold over the crowd as merchants shouted offers in a dozen languages. The air carried the sharp tang of cumin, roasted lamb, and smoke from charcoal fires. Emily moved carefully between stalls, her senses drowning in the chaos. And yet, those eyes. The man hadn't looked away since she noticed him. He stood tall, his dark hair swept back, his shirt crisp despite the heat. When Emily finally tried to shake it off and continue browsing, he pushed off the wooden post he'd been leaning against and crossed the crowd with purposeful ease. Lost already? His voice was deep, accented, but smooth as silk. Emily startled, clutching her tote bag a little tighter. No, just looking. He smiled, a practiced smile that revealed perfect teeth. You don't look like someone just looking. You look like someone searching. She laughed softly, though nerves tightened her chest. Maybe I am. The man extended a hand, palm open. Kareem, I give tours. Not the tourist kind, the real kind. Not pyramids with loud buses and plastic souvenirs. Egypt that breathes. Egypt that is alive. Emily hesitated before shaking his hand. His grip was warm, firm, lingering. Emily, she offered, her voice quieter. Kareem tilted his head, studying her as though she were an artifact under glass. Emily, he repeated, savoring it. A name from across the sea. Something in the way he said it unsettled her, though she couldn't explain why. She pulled her hand back and gestured toward the crowded bazaar. This seems alive enough. He chuckled, low and confident. This is noise for tourists. I can show you the Egypt hidden in shadows. The Egypt even Egyptians forget. Emily forced a smile, though her instincts whispered caution. I'm fine on my own. Thank you. But Kareem didn't flinch. He stepped aside as a boy carrying bread rushed past, then leaned slightly closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. A woman alone in Cairo is noticed, not always kindly. Better to have someone trusted. Emily's breath caught. Was that concern or warning? She opened her mouth, then closed it again. It had been so long since someone looked at her with that kind of attention, as though her presence mattered. For months, she had been invisible, to her ex-husband, to the courts, to the world that only saw her failures. And now, this stranger's gaze seemed to burn through her walls. Kareem gestured toward a stall, where an old man sold brass lamps. Let me show you something, he said. Against her better judgment, Emily followed. He spoke in Arabic to the vendor, who grinned and handed Kareem a lamp etched with hieroglyphs. Kareem offered it to her. Pharaohs believed objects carry souls, he explained. Touch this, and you hold more than metal. You hold history. Emily ran her fingers across the cool brass. The carvings felt alive beneath her skin. She looked up, surprised at how intently Kareem was watching her, not the lamp, not the crowd, but her. See, he whispered. Egypt opens itself to those who listen. The moment stretched too long. She placed the lamp back quickly and forced a laugh. You really know how to sell a tour. Not sell, Kareem corrected smoothly. Invite. Her guard flickered. Maybe it was harmless. Maybe he really was just another guide chasing business. And yet, something in his gaze was too sharp, too hungry, as if the invitation wasn't for Egypt, but for something else entirely. The crowd jostled her shoulder, snapping her back to the noise of the bazaar. She turned, ready to excuse herself. But Kareem spoke again, softly enough that only she could hear. You don't have to be alone here, Emily. Not unless you want to be. Her heart thudded. She told herself to walk away, to return to her hotel. Instead, she found herself lingering, torn between caution and the strange warmth in his tone. And as the market lights flickered against the darkening sky, Emily didn't know it yet. But her first step into Kareem's orbit had already been taken. The first dinner was innocent enough, or so Emily told herself. Kareem had insisted, with that calm persistence of his, that she couldn't leave Cairo without tasting the food locals loved. The restaurant he chose was tucked down a narrow alley, lanterns strung overhead, tables spilling into the street. The smell of grilled lamb and cinnamon rice filled the air. You see, Kareem smiled, gesturing to the steaming plates set before them. This is Egypt, not the postcards, not the pyramids. This is the heart. Emily sipped the mint tea, letting its sweetness cut the spice of food. She wanted to argue, to remind herself that she didn't owe this man her company. But instead she found herself saying softly, "It's beautiful." Over the next few nights, Dinners became routine. Kareem always knew where to go. A place by the river one evening, a rooftop with city lights spilling beneath them the next. The city that had overwhelmed her at first now unfolded gently under his guidance, as though he held a map to its soul. On the rooftop, beneath a sky scattered with stars, Kareem leaned against the railing, speaking not of tourist sites, but of ancient dynasties and love stories carved into stone. The pharaohs, he said, voice low, believed love was eternal, that loyalty bound two souls together even in the afterlife. It was destiny written before birth. Emily laughed, but the sound caught in her throat. Sound like a fairy tale. He turned to her, his gaze unblinking. No, it is truth. Loyalty is everything. Without it, love is nothing. The words hit her harder than she expected. Maybe it was a night air, or the way the Nile glimmered in the distance, but she suddenly wanted to tell him everything. She spoke haltingly at first, about her ex-husband, the fights that hollowed her out, the custody battle that had torn her apart, the shame of feeling like she was failing her son. Each confession spilled like water from a cracked glass, unstoppable once it began. Kareem listened intently, never interrupting. His silence felt heavy, not dismissive but absorbing, as if he was taking in every wound she carried. When she finished, tears stinging her eyes, he stepped closer. "You are stronger than you know," he murmured. "Most women would have broken. But you are still here. You came across an ocean alone. That is not weakness. That is power." Emily swallowed hard, her chest tightening. No one had spoken to her like that in years. "I don't feel powerful," she admitted. He reached for her hand, his touch deliberate, warm. "Then let me remind you." The rooftop seemed to shrink around them, the sounds of Cairo dimming to nothing but the space between their breaths. She should have pulled away, but instead she let his hand linger. From that night forward, her world tilted. She began to see Kareem not just as a guide, but as an anchor. He knew where to walk so she wouldn't be hassled, what words to say so vendors stopped pressing, how to navigate the chaos of Cairo with ease. With him, she wasn't invisible. She was seen, and slowly, imperceptibly, his words began to wrap around her like silk threads. "You can trust me more than anyone," he would say, half joking but never entirely. "This city can swallow strangers, but I would never let that happen to you." Emily told herself it was harmless, that she wasn't naive enough to be manipulated. Yet every time he said it, she believed him a little more. One evening, as they walked along the river, Kareem paused, studying her. "Do you want to see the Egypt no tourist ever sees?" She smiled nervously. "Isn't that what you've been showing me already?" He shook his head. "No, the true Egypt, not the city, not the noise, the desert, the silence. That is where the soul of this land lives." Emily hesitated, the warning bells faint but undeniable. Still, when his hand brushed hers again, she found herself nodding. "Okay," she whispered. Kareem's smile was slow, satisfied. "Then trust me, Emily. I'll take you there." The promise lingered in the night air, carrying both comfort and a shadow she couldn't yet name. The morning sun burned pale and sharp as Kareem pulled the Jeep onto the road leading out of Cairo. Emily sat in the passenger seat, fingers knotted in her lap, watching the city fade in the rear-view mirror. The honking horns, the vendors, the rush of bodies, all swallowed by distance until only empty highways stretched ahead. "You will see," Kareem said, his hand steady on the wheel. "The desert changes everything. There, people can hear their own souls." Emily tried to smile, though unease prickled at her skin. "Sounds quiet." Kareem glanced at her, the corner of his mouth curving. "Quiet, yes, but not empty. The desert remembers." She turned toward the window, pretending to admire the scenery. Concrete gave way to fields, fields of sand, until nothing but horizon remained. The vastness unsettled her. The land looked endless, a sea without water. For hours they drove in silence. Kareem seemed entirely at ease, humming a tune under his breath. Emily shifted, trying to relax, but every mile away from Cairo tightened the knot in her stomach. She told herself she was being paranoid. After all, wasn't this what she wanted? Adventure? Escape? The Jeep rattled over uneven ground as they left the paved highway behind. Sand sprayed the windows, and the engine groaned in protest. The sky stretched blindingly blue, the sun merciless. Sweat clung to her neck despite the air conditioning. Kareem finally broke the silence. In Texas, you have deserts too, yes? Emily nodded. Not like this. Ours feel flat. Ordinary. This desert, he said, gesturing to the endless expanse, is alive. Pharaohs built kingdoms here. Their blood is in the sand. Do you feel it? Emily swallowed, her throat dry. She wanted to say no, but instead whispered, maybe. Kareem smiled, satisfied. Good. You are beginning to listen. They stopped once, by a lonely roadside cafe little more than a shack with a tin roof. A boy brought them bottled water, his wide eyes darting nervously toward Kareem before lowering to the ground. Emily noticed the exchange, a flicker of fear in the boy's movements, but Kareem dismissed it with a laugh and a tip. Back in the Jeep, the silence pressed heavier. Emily stared at the horizon, but the more she looked, the more it felt like staring into nothingness. Her chest tightened. Where exactly are we going? She asked finally. Kareem's eyes stayed fixed on the road, a place few outsiders see. A house built in the old ways, away from the world. You will understand when we arrive. Her pulse quickened. Shouldn't we tell a hotel? Or someone, just in case. He shot her a sharp look, then softened it with another smile. Do you not trust me by now? Emily forced a laugh, hating the way her voice shook. I do. I just... Then relax, he interrupted gently, his hand brushing her arm. You came here to escape, didn't you? Stop holding on to the chains of your old life. She nodded, silent, though the word chain sat uncomfortably in her mind. As the sun dipped lower, the desert deepened in color, gold to amber to a shadowed red. At last, structures emerged on the horizon. Not ruins, as she first thought, but walls, high and pale, rising out of the sand like a mirage. Kareem slowed the Jeep, his smile fixed, eyes gleaming in the dying light. Welcome, Emily, he said softly, to where the Real Egypt begins. The gates loomed large as they approached, carved with ancient symbols that seemed to glare in the fading sun. Emily's breath hitched. It didn't look like a home. It looked like a fortress. And as the gates creaked open, a cold shiver ran down her spine. She told herself again it was only nerves. But deep inside, she knew something was wrong. The iron gates groaned shut behind them, sealing the desert away with a finality that made Emily's stomach clench. Kareem drove the Jeep slowly up a long stone pathway. On either side rose towering statues of falcons and jackals, their carved eyes catching the moonlight as if watching every movement. The mansion came into view, and Emily sucked in a breath. It was vast. Columns carved with hieroglyphs stretched upward. Torches flickered along balconies, and walls gleamed pale against the darkness. It looked less like a home and more like a recreation of some ancient palace. Impressive, isn't it? Kareem's voice was proud, almost reverent. Emily nodded, but unease slid beneath her awe. Something about the scale felt wrong, theatrical, like stepping into a stage play where she didn't know the script. The Jeep stopped at the base of wide marble steps. Two men in plain uniforms opened the doors before Kareem could. Their eyes flickered toward Emily briefly, then dropped to the ground, avoiding her gaze. She hesitated, suitcase still clutched, until Kareem gestured sharply. Come, he said. This is your new home. New home. The words lodged in her chest like a stone. Inside, the palace glowed with opulence, gold-trimmed ceilings, sprawling carpets, and chandeliers dripping with crystal. Yet the silence pressed heavy. No chatter, no laughter, only the distant shuffle of feet. Emily felt as if she were trespassing in a place not meant for life. Kareem's hand rested lightly on her back as he guided her through hallways that twisted endlessly. Each doorway they passed seemed to close behind them with a muted click. Staff members moved quickly, bowing their heads, never meeting her eyes. Emily forced a nervous laugh. It's beautiful, but so big. Don't you ever get lost? Kareem's smile didn't reach his eyes. No, this house is mine. Every corner, every stone. Nothing happens here without my knowing. The possessiveness in his tone made her skin prickle. He led her into a chamber that looked like a suite from a luxury hotel. Plush bed draped in silk, balcony overlooking the desert, polished mirrors gleaming under soft light. Emily stepped inside, almost relieved, until she heard the quiet click behind her. The door had locked. She turned. Did they just lock it? Kareem leaned casually against the wall, his smile sharper now, colder. For your safety. This is a sacred place. Not everyone would understand your presence here. Emily swallowed. My safety. Yes. His gaze lingered, unblinking. You are special. Precious. I cannot let the world corrupt you again. The word were meant to sound protective, but his tone carried ownership. Emily forced a small nod, hiding the unease clawing at her chest. Later, when she tried to step onto the balcony, she found iron bars hidden within the carved railings. Even the windows, wide and elegant, didn't open. She pressed her hands against the glass, staring out at the endless desert. No roads, no lights, just sand stretching to infinity. Dinner was brought to her room by a young woman in a white headscarf. Emily tried to smile, to say thank you, but the woman kept her eyes down, placing the tray silently before hurrying away. Wait, please, Emily called after her, desperate for some acknowledgement, but the woman disappeared without a word. When Emily turned back, Kareem was watching from the doorway. His expression was unreadable, but his presence filled the room like a shadow. You will learn, he said softly, that here, people know their place. Her heart pounded. And mine? She asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. His smile returned, sharp and certain. By my side, always. He stepped forward, brushing a hand against her cheek. The gesture was tender, yet beneath it throbbed possession, a warning disguised as affection. Emily forced herself to stay still until he left. Only when the lock clicked again did she let her breath escape in ragged gasps. She pressed her palms against the cold wall, her mind racing. This wasn't adventure. This wasn't freedom. This was a cage. And though the walls gleamed with gold and silk, the silence told the truth. Once inside, no one ever left. The next morning, Emily woke to the sound of keys turning in her door. A maid entered silently, carrying folded garments of shimmering silk. Behind her came Kareem, his presence filling the room before he spoke. Rise, Emily, he said smoothly. Today you begin your new life. Emily sat upright, clutching the blanket. What do you mean? I thought we were only staying here for a few days. Kareem's eyes darkened. You still think in days and weeks. Here, there is no time, only belonging. He stepped forward, placing the garments on the bed. Golden silk embroidered with symbols of falcons and lotus flowers caught the morning light, dazzling and oppressive all at once. Emily shook her head. This is me. I don't wear. Kareem cut her off with a sharpness she hadn't heard before. You will. These are not clothes. They are honor. Do you think the queens of Egypt chose their crowns? No, they wore them because they were chosen. Her heart pounded. Kareem, I need my phone. My passport. I need to at least let people know where I am. His smile curved, but it carried no warmth. From his pocket, he produced her passport, her phone, even her wallet. He held them casually in one hand, like trinkets. These, he said, are chains of your old world. They kept you small, invisible, unloved. I have freed you. Emily lunged for them, but he pulled back easily, almost amused. No, you belong to me now. Do not mistake my love for weakness. The words froze her in place. Belong. Not loved, not cherished. Belong. Kareem gestured toward the garments again. Dress. I want to see you as you are meant to be. Emily swallowed her pride, her rage, her fear. Slowly, she lifted the silk. It slid over her skin like water, cool and suffocating at once. When she stood, draped in gold, Kareem's expression softened into satisfaction. Perfect, he whispered, circling her as though inspecting a statue. Now you see, you are not a tourist. You are not a broken woman from America. You are mine, my queen. Emily forced herself to meet his gaze. Queens have power. They are not prisoners. For a moment, Silence crackled between them. Then Kareem chuckled low, shaking his head. Always so spirited. That will fade. In time, you'll understand obedience is not weakness. It is destiny. He lifted her chin with his fingers, his touch both tender and commanding. You do not need to worry about the outside world. I will protect you from it. Your only duty now is to stay by me. Loyal, beautiful, silent when required. Emily's stomach twisted. She wanted to scream, to claw her way out, but the weight of the locked doors, the watchful staff, and the endless desert pressed down on her. Later, when Kareem left her alone, she searched desperately for her belongings. She tore through drawers, under the bed, inside the wardrobe. Nothing. He had hidden everything. When she collapsed onto the floor, breath shuddering, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. The woman staring back was draped in gold, hair pinned, lips trembling. She looked less like Emily Dawson of Texas, and more like a replica of some long-dead queen. But her eyes still screamed. That night, Kareem dined with her in the grand hall, servants hovering silently. He toasted her with dark wine, speaking of dynasties, loyalty, and eternity. She barely tasted the food, her mind spinning with panic. Every smile he gave her felt like a chain. Every word of devotion was another lock turning. When he finally rose, pressing a kiss to her forehead, he whispered, "Sleep well, my queen. Tomorrow you'll begin to forget the world you came from." The door locked behind him with a click. Emily sat alone at the long table, silk pressing against her skin like shackles. And in the silence, her thoughts went not to escape, not to Kareem, but to her son's face, the one person she had left behind. Emily lay awake, silk sheets tangled around her legs, the darkness of the room pressing against her chest like a weight, her eyes stung with tears that refused to fall. Every time she closed them, she saw her son, Ethan, smiling with his missing front tooth, his arms outstretched the way he had waved goodbye at the airport. "Just 1 week, baby. Mommy will come back stronger." Her voice and memory was a knife now. The loneliness was unbearable. Kareem's palace gleamed with opulence, but it was a tomb. Cold stone halls, locked doors, and servants who would not meet her gaze. Her world had shrunk to the size of her chamber. She pressed her forehead against the window bars one night, staring at the desert. The horizon stretched forever, mocking her with its freedom. That was when the thought became certainty. I have to get out. The next morning, when a maid entered with food, Emily watched carefully. The woman bowed her head, set down a tray, and turned. For a brief moment, the door stood unlatched. Emily's heart slammed against her ribs. Now, she shoved past the maid, darting into the corridor. Her bare feet slapped against the marble floor as she ran. The walls blurred. Somewhere behind her, the maid shouted. Emily sprinted down one hall, then another, praying for an exit, and then hands seized her. 2 guards appeared from the shadows, dragging her back as she kicked and screamed. "Let me go. Please, my son needs me." Her voice cracked with desperation, but the guards' faces were stone. Kareem appeared moments later, his stride calm, his expression unreadable. He dismissed the guard with a flick of his hand, then crouched beside her where she had crumpled to the floor. "Emily," he said softly, almost tender, "why would you do this? Do you not see how dangerous the desert is? Alone, you would be lost in hours. The sun would burn you alive." She glared at him through tears. "I'd rather die free than live like this. I need to go home. Ethan, he's just a little boy. He needs me." For the first time, something flickered in Kareem's eyes. Annoyance, quickly masked. He cupped her face, wiping her tears with his thumb. "I understand your pain. Truly I do. But listen, you don't have to suffer. If you trust me, if you stay, I will allow you to write letters. I will send them to your family. They will know you are safe. Your son will know you love him." Her sobs slowed. The words wrapped around her like a fragile rope thrown to a drowning woman. You'd really let me?" "Of course." His voice was velvet, each syllable crafted to soothe. "But only if you obey. No more running. No more resistance. Queens are not rebels, Emily. They are symbols of devotion." She nodded weakly, clinging to the promise. That night, he placed parchment and ink before her. Her hand trembled as she wrote Ethan's name, as though speaking to him across the ocean. "My sweet boy," she began, tears splattering the page. "Mommy loves you. I'm safe. I will come home soon." She wrote until her hand ached, pouring love and apology into every line. When she handed the letter to Kareem, he kissed her forehead. "Good. This is a first step. He will know you love him." Days passed. She waited. Each sunrise, she asked the servants if there was a reply. They lowered their eyes. Kareem avoided the subject. It was only when she overheard two servants whispering about letters burned in the hearth that the truth clawed its way in. He had never sent them. Her heart fractured. The hope he dangled before her was only another chain, disguised as kindness. And for the first time, Emily felt not just fear, but hatred. Emily's hatred burned quietly in her chest after the revelation about the letters. She still played her role, still donned the silk garments Kareem chose, still lowered her gaze when he demanded obedience. But inside, something shifted. If escape was impossible through the doors and guards, she would look elsewhere. One evening, after a forced dinner with Kareem where she smiled through clenched teeth, Emily asked to be excused early. Back in her chamber, she waited until the footsteps outside her door faded. She tested the handle, locked as always, but she had learned the rhythm of the servants' comings and goings. And tonight, when one came in with linens, Emily noticed the key ring dangling carelessly at her side. Her pulse thundered. As the maid bent to straighten the bed, Emily's fingers slipped out, lifting one key with the softest motion. She held her breath until the woman left. The lock clicked open moments later. She crept into the corridor, heart pounding, ears straining for footsteps. The palace was a labyrinth of halls and chambers, torchlight flickering across carved stone walls. She turned corners blindly, pressing herself against cool marble whenever shadows passed. Finally, she stumbled upon a stairwell half hidden behind a heavy drape. The air grew cooler as she descended. Dust clung to her throat. At the bottom, she found a narrow passage. Her fingers trailed across the wall until they touched a wooden door. Ancient, scarred with symbols she didn't understand. With a push, it groaned open. The chamber beyond smelled of earth and time. Lanterns burned dimly, as though lit only occasionally, but enough to reveal what lay inside. Emily froze. It wasn't a storage room. It was a shrine, or a tomb. Mannequins draped in garments similar to hers stood in rows, their silk faded, their crowns tarnished. Along the walls, shelves overflowed with jewelry, combs, and hairpins, each carefully arranged. She stepped closer and her breath caught. They weren't decorations. They were personal belongings. Purses, shoes, even passports. Her hands trembled as she picked up one, an American passport, edges frayed, the face of a young woman staring back at her. Next to it, another, and another, names, ages, different countries. The pile grew like a roll call that vanished. Emily staggered back, bile rising in her throat. She wasn't the first. Kareem had brought others here, wrapped them in silk, called them queens, and they had never returned. On a low table, she saw something else, a necklace with a locket. Curious, desperate, she opened it. Inside was a photo, another woman, holding a child, just like her. Emily's knees gave way. She clutched the locket as tears blurred her vision. This wasn't just cruelty. This was ritual, a cycle of possession. And the palace wasn't a home. It was a graveyard of stolen lives, preserved like artifacts for Kareem's twisted dynasty. The silence of the chamber pressed on her ears. Every object screamed of women who had laughed, fought, prayed to go home. Now they were ghosts, trapped in silk and gold. Her rage flared hot and cold. I will not be one of them. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from above. Panic jolted her upright. She shoved the locket into her pocket and extinguished the lantern. Holding her breath, she slipped behind a stone pillar as the door creaked open. A guard's shadow stretched long across the floor. Emily pressed her hand over her mouth, forcing stillness as the man scanned the room. Seconds dragged like hours. Finally, he muttered in Arabic and left, the door shutting again. Emily exhaled shakily, her legs barely holding her weight. She knew she couldn't linger. She slipped back into the corridor, clutching the stolen locket like a lifeline. By the time she returned to her chamber and relocked the door behind her, her resolve had hardened. The others might have been silenced, erased, turned into relics, but she still breathed. She whispered into the darkness, voice steady now. Not me, not Ethan's mother. And for the first time since her arrival, Emily stopped thinking like a victim and started planning like a survivor. Days blended into one another inside the palace. Each hour a repetition of silk garments, stage meals, and Kareem's suffocating adoration. To anyone looking in, Emily might have seemed tamed, her posture straight, her voice quiet, her eyes lowered in supposed obedience. But inside, she was unraveling. The nights were the worst. The silence after the doors locked felt alive, pressing against her chest until she couldn't breathe. She would wake in cold sweats, reaching for her son, only to touch cold sheets. Every dream of Ethan's laughter became a nightmare when she awoke to stone walls. Isolation chewed at her mind like acid. It was that very ache, her son's absence, that kept her from breaking completely. He's waiting. He still needs me. I will not die here. Her body trembled from fear, but her spirit began whispering rebellion. Kareem, in his arrogance, believed she was bending to him. He mistook her silence for surrender, her lowered gaze for devotion. He spoke to her, as though she were already molded into the queen he imagined. "You are stronger now," he told her one evening, pouring wine into her cup. "The weakness of America, of your old life, it's gone. You belong to me, and together we will live forever, like the pharaohs." Emily forced a small smile, her fingers steady on the goblet. "Forever," she echoed softly. But inside, her heart spat the word like venom. Forever wasn't devotion. It was a prison sentence. She began studying him in silence. The way he strutted when he believed he had control. The way he boasted of loyalty while ignoring the servants' downcast eyes. The way he grew careless when drunk on his own power. His pride was his weakness, and she would use it. Small acts of defiance became her secret rebellion. At first, they were almost invisible. She had bits of food, scraps of cloth, anything that could later serve a purpose. She slipped questions into conversations with the maids, pretending to be idle chatter, but filing away every detail, the timing of guard shifts, the layout of distant corridors. Most importantly, she learned to mask her hatred, to let Kareem see only the version of her he wanted. Docile, grateful, awed by his presence. It was a performance, one she played with every ounce of strength. But when she was alone, the cracks widened. She whispered to herself, her voice hoarse in the dark. Not me, not Ethan's mother. The words became her anchor, her battle cry. One evening, as Kareem draped another necklace around her throat, she caught a reflection in the mirror. Gold shimmered at her collarbone, but her eyes burned. They weren't the eyes of a broken woman anymore. They were sharp, calculating, alive with a new fire. Kareem noticed a shift. "You look different tonight," he said, narrowing his gaze. Emily tilted her head slightly, letting a coy smile ghost across her lips. "Perhaps I'm finally becoming your queen." The answer pleased him. He leaned back, satisfied, never realizing that what he saw wasn't submission. It was war painted across her face. At night, when the palace slept, she pulled the locket from her hiding place and held it tight. The photo of the unknown woman and her child stared back at her like a warning and a promise. They were silenced. But I won't be. Every day after that, Emily rehearsed her survival, not in words, but in silence, by watching, waiting, and planning. The fear still gnawed at her, but it was no longer her master. It was fuel. She was no longer just surviving Kareem's palace. She was preparing to tear it apart from the inside. And though he didn't know it yet, the game between them had shifted. The queen had chosen war. The sun blazed mercilessly overhead, baking the dunes until the air shimmered like molten glass. Emily squinted against the glare as the jeep cut across the sand, each jolt rattling through her bones. Beside her, Kareem gripped the wheel with casual command, the desert stretching endlessly in every direction. He had insisted they ride out that morning. claiming he wanted to show her the beauty of Egypt beyond walls and stone. Emily had agreed with quiet nod, hiding the shard of broken glass tucked beneath her waistband, wrapped in cloth to keep from cutting her skin. She had stolen it weeks earlier, a splinter from a shattered vase. Tonight, it would serve a different purpose. Kareem glanced at her with that smile. The one that once charmed her, now only curdled her stomach. Do you feel it, Emily? Out here, there is nothing but eternity. The pharaohs walk these sands. And now you, my queen. She forced a small smile, her hands clenched in her lap. Her heart beat not with awe but with calculation. No walls, no guards, just him and me. The jeep finally ground to a halt on a ridge overlooking an ocean of dunes. Kareem stepped out, extending his hand with exaggerated chivalry. Come, I want you to see what forever looks like. Emily's legs trembled as she climbed down, the heat searing her skin. Sand shifted beneath her feet, soft and treacherous. Kareem led her a few steps away, raising his arms as if he owned the horizon. This, he declared, voice booming against the silence, is freedom. No chains, no past, only us. Her laugh cracked the air, bitter and sharp. Freedom? You locked me in a palace. You stole my life. Kareem turned, his smile fading. I saved you. From heartbreak. From weakness. From a world that never deserved you. Emily's voice rose, fueled by months of suffocation. You didn't save me. You caged me. You killed them, didn't you? The others. All the women before me. For the first time, Kareem's mask slipped, his eyes hardened, jaw tightening. He stepped closer. They were unworthy. They didn't understand. But you... He grabbed her wrist, squeezing until pain shot her arm. You are different. Emily's other hand slid slowly to her waistband, fingers closing around the shard. His grip tightened. Say it. Say you belong to me. The desert swallowed her whisper. No. And then she moved. The shard flashed in the sunlight as she swung, slicing across his forearm. Kareem roared, stumbling back, blood blooming scarlet against the sand. Emily's chest heaved as adrenaline surged, her whole body trembling. He lunged. She slashed again, this time striking his shoulder. The shard tore skin, but not deep enough. He seized her by the throat, dragging her close, his breath hot and furious. You think you can kill me? He spat, blood dripping down his arm. You are nothing without me. Nothing. Her vision darkened as his grip crushed her windpipe. Desperation burned in her lungs. With the last of her strength, she drove the shard upward into his side. His body jerked, a guttural sound ripping from his throat. He released her, staggering backward, crimson spilling down his white shirt. Emily collapsed to her knees, coughing, the shard slipping from her bloody hand. The desert swayed around her, the horizon spinning. Kareem stood a few feet away, clutching his side, his expression twisted with fury and disbelief. His blood painted the sand, each drop sinking instantly into the earth. But he did not fall. He straightened slowly, teeth bared. You will never leave me. Emily forced herself upright, her legs unsteady but her will unbroken. The desert wind howled between them, carrying the metallic scent of blood. They faced each other in the endless dunes, queen and captor, survivor and predator, mother and monster. The shard lay half-buried at her feet. Kareem's eyes burned with vengeance as he stepped forward again. Emily's breath hitched, her hand twitching toward the weapon, and the desert waited, silent and merciless, ready to claim whichever fate the sand would swallow. The desert had tried to claim her, but somehow Emily staggered through it. Each step was a war against her collapsing body. Her lips were cracked, her skin blistered, her clothes stiff with blood and sand. Kareem's voice still echoed in her ears, though she no longer knew if it was memory or hallucination. She walked toward the mirage of rooftops shimmering in the distance, half believing she would dissolve before reaching them. But the rooftops solidified into houses. Civilization. A shepherd spotted her first. His goats scattered as he rushed toward the strange figure stumbling over the dunes. He shouted, waving his arms. Villagers emerged from doorways, their eyes wide as they took in sight. A foreign woman, ragged, bleeding, barefoot, dragging herself forward with the last threads of will. Hands reached for her. Words in Arabic surrounded her, too fast to understand. Someone pressed a water skin to her lips. She drank greedily until the liquid choked her. Another woman draped a shawl over her shoulders. Emily clutched it, shaking, barely able to whisper, "Help me." Embassy. America. The villagers carried her inside. Phone calls were made. Hours blurred as if seen through fog. Finally, officials in suits and dark glasses arrived. Their English was clipped, efficient. "You're safe now," one told her, though his tone carried more procedure than comfort. They guided her into a black car, whisking her away from the village, away from the dunes that still seemed to breathe Kareem's name. At the U.S. Embassy in Cairo, the sterile white walls and humming air conditioners should have soothed her. Instead, they felt alien. A woman with kind eyes took her statement. Emily's words tumbled out. Palace, captivity, other women, blood and sand. The woman's pen scribbled, nodding, but Emily could see skepticism flicker across her face. "You'll need to rest," the official said softly. "We'll contact the authorities." But Emily knew what that meant. Layers of bureaucracy, jurisdictional walls, polite shrugs dressed as diplomacy. Would they hunt Kareem if he still lived? Would they dig into the palace of silence? Or would her nightmare be filed away as the confused ramblings of a traumatized tourist? She wanted to scream, "There are others! There were others before me," but her throat closed around the words. Instead, she stared at the glass of water on the table, watching the ripples tremble in her own shaking hand. They placed her in a hotel under embassy watch. A soft bed, clean clothes, food she could barely taste. She curled up in the sheets, but sleep was no refuge. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the palace corridors, the locked doors, the artifacts of vanished women, and always Kareem, smiling, bleeding, rising again from the sand. Days later, she was put on a flight back to Texas. Strangers in uniforms guided her through security, through boarding, through the cocoon of the airplane. Passengers glanced at her with curiosity, sensing something off but not daring to ask. At 30,000 feet, Emily pressed her forehead to the cold window. Clouds drifted beneath her, white and serene. She was alive, alive when she shouldn't be. The realization brought no joy, only a numbness so deep it frightened her. Back in Texas, her family embraced her with tears. Her son clung to her waist, his small arms anchoring her to the earth. She held him so tightly he whimpered. Yet even as she kissed his hair, she felt the distance. She had survived, but part of her was still in the desert, still behind locked doors, still hearing Kareem whisper "Queen." Reporters came sniffing, but she refused them. The story was too raw, too unbelievable. Officials contacted her for follow-ups, promising investigations. Nothing concrete came. Kareem's name was never on the news. No arrests, no trials. The palace remained hidden in sand and silence. Emily lived on, raising her son, working, breathing, but every mirror showed a stranger. The scar on her wrist from Kareem's grip never faded. Sometimes in the night, she woke gasping, convinced the sound of shifting sand outside her window was his footsteps returning. Freedom had come, but it was hollow. She was branded by betrayal, scarred by silence, reshaped by survival. Justice was a mirage. All she truly cared was the truth of what she had endured, alone, unseen, and unforgettable. And for Emily Dawson, survival itself was the only truth she could ever truly claim.